It's Adam here for PC Monitors, and today I'm going to be taking a look at the OSD on-screen display menu system of the AOC AG322QCX. The OSD is controlled by two different methods. There's a joystick or jog button on the underside of the bottom bezel. You can see it illuminated with a blue LED there. You can't really see that blue LED from a normal viewing position, however. There's also a little remote control, and that's connected to the monitor using a mini USB cable. It's a pretty long cable actually. I've got a fairly big desk here and I can put it anywhere I want on the desk. I could put it somewhere beside the desk if I wanted. It's a pretty long cable. The joystick itself, I'll just run through the functionality of that first. If you press it inwards, you get the main menu, the main OSD. If you just press it upwards, you can select the input source. If you twiddle it to the left, you can activate a game mode, and these are some of the presets on the monitor. I don't like them very much because they lock off some of the image controls, they cause oversaturation, oversharp image. They just sort of upset the balance, and to my well-trained eyes, things do not look as they should at all. But you know, there are a few if you want to use them. There's FPS, RTS, Racing, Gamer 1, Gamer 2 and Gamer 3, which are customizable to some extent. I write a bit more about those in the review, and I might show you in the main OSD system if I remember. If you twiddle the joystick down, you can adjust shadow control. You can also access this in the main menu system, but it's a bit like BenQ's black equalizer if you're familiar with that. The default value of 50 gives you the most accurate image reproduction. If you want things to look a bit more intense and dark shades to deepen, you can reduce the shadow control. You can see everything's looking very dark now. But the main reason you'd want to use shadow control is actually to make it higher than 50. So that starts giving the image a flooded look, especially if you put it all the way to 100. But the idea is that it also makes dark shades lighter, so enemies and shadows and stuff on your game, they're more visible. I could open Lagom for you. I've obviously got one of the game presets open at the moment. Activated. I'm just going to turn that off because the image is actually doing my head in. That's much better. So if I open Lagom, I'll be able to explain the shadow control to you a little bit better. The black level test. It's a bright room, so you won't be able to see this very well, and the representation depends on the camera anyway, but I'll at least be able to show you what the shadow control, the effect that has on certain dark shades. So it's on 50, the default. You lower it. Even if you lower it to 40, I can only actually see the bottom row of shades now. So that, I don't know why you really want to do that, but even if you raise it to 60, you can see the visibility of those darker shades increasing considerably. I think you get the idea. If you twiddle the joystick to the right, you can control the LEDs of the monitor. They've got some sort of ambient LEDs. You can change the intensity. There's a strip of LEDs on the underside of the bezel. There's actually sort of an LED there, or a cluster of LEDs, and also there, and it sort of illuminates the strip along. You can see that from the front of the monitor as well. It's a bit more impressive in a dark room. Unfortunately, I'm in quite a bright room here, so the effect isn't quite as obvious. You can change the intensity to weak, medium, or strong, or turn it off completely. You can also change the colour from blue to red. There's also green. And there are further LED strips at the rear of the monitor. You can see there's sort of like at the rear, the strip there. There's one at the other side as well. Some nifty camera work needed to show you that. There you go. And again, they're controlled with the same control as the ones on the front, so whatever the ones on the bottom of the bezel are doing, the ones on the back will do as well. The OSD controller, you can see that has sort of basic navigation. It's got left and right arrows, up and down arrows, menu / OK, 1, 2 and 3, which correspond to various the gamer presets which I mentioned before. So if you go on the main menu system, which I'll run through here, I'll put my camera on a tripod as well so it's not quite as shaky for you. As you can see, the menu is laid out in AOC's usual widescreen style, using a lot of horizontal screen space. This system hasn't actually changed since 2011, although various features have been added to the system. It's a fairly straightforward layout. The first section of the menu is luminance, and this allows you to adjust basic things such as contrast and brightness. There's an eco mode function, and that just changes the brightness of the monitor to various preset values, and then locks off manual control of the brightness and indeed the contrast. There are 3 different gamma settings which were explored in the review. There's DCR, dynamic contrast ratio, which is also explored in the review. Image setup, which is greyed out unless you're using VGA or an analog connection. Everything's handled automatically on digital connections. The colour setup menu allows you to adjust the colour temperature. You can select user, which gives you access to the red, green and blue colour channels and allows you to manually configure them to your liking. Alternatively, there's warm, which is the factory default on this screen and also all modern AOC monitors. Normal, cool and sRGB. These are all explored in the calibration section of the written review. There's DCB mode, dynamic colour boost, and this selectively oversaturates certain shades, or if you select the full enhance option, increases the saturation of all shades. It doesn't change the colour gamut of the monitor. What it does is it pulls shades closer to the edge of the gamut to make them appear more saturated than they should, and in doing so it also reduces the variety of shades which you see. But this can be used to highlight certain areas of the image, or if you like certain shades becoming more saturated, then you can do this. Nature Skin, for example, makes red tones more saturated. Green Fields selectively oversaturates certain green shades. Sky Blue does the same with certain blue shades. Auto Detect apparently adjusts that with the content. I haven't really tested this in detail though. I like to leave it off. Next there's Picture Boost, which controls the bright frame feature of the monitor, and this allows you to independently adjust the digital brightness and the contrast of a certain section of the screen. The brightness control here is different to the main brightness control of the monitor because the backlight of the monitor is all controlled as one unit, so you can't just have one section of the screen brighter or dimmer than the other in terms of what the backlight's doing, but you can alter the digital brightness, which makes sort of alters the gamma and lightens shades or darkens certain shades. It doesn't have an effect on the black level or anything like that. So the frame is actually, I'll just move it so you can make it bigger and smaller. You can also adjust the position on the screen. I know with the camera mounted on the tripod you can't see the small box up there, which I was looking at before, but you can see that there's an area of the screen, a box, which is controlled independently of the rest of the screen in terms of the digital brightness and contrast levels. So you might use that if you want to highlight a particular area of the image, I mean, I don't use the feature myself, but I know some people do like to play around with that kind of thing, or make a map on your RTS game a bit more visible, perhaps, something like that. OSD setup allows you to change the language that the OSD is displayed in, the timeout period, which is the time after the last button press, after which the OSD system will automatically close. DP capability, set that to 1.2 unless you're using an older graphics card that doesn't support that, then you can select 1.1. So it's just a compatibility thing. The full capabilities of the screen, including adaptive sync, FreeSync capability, 144 Hz at 2560 by 1440. You should be using DP 1.2 if your graphics card supports it. You can change the horizontal and vertical position of the OSD on the screen. I've got it central at the moment, just for the sake of the video with the tripod mount. You'll recall that earlier it was actually at the bottom of the screen, and that's the default position. You can change the volume level of the integrated speakers as well, or anything connected to the 3.5mm jack if you prefer to use that. You can change the transparency level of the OSD. There's a break reminder feature, and what that'll do is after an hour, when you've been using the monitor for an hour, it'll just put a little message on the screen reminding you to take a break. And if you press any button, then it'll just disappear and stop bothering you, but it'll do that every hour. I mean, I think it's every hour. I haven't actually tested it myself recently, but it used to be every hour it does that. Game settings. This allows you to change the game mode, which I showed you before. You'll see that when you activate one of these game modes, a lot of stuff is actually greyed out and it's configured for you in that way, whether you like it or not. For example, I can't even change the brightness of the screen with this particular game profile active. So it's very restrictive. The Gamer 1, Gamer 2 and Gamer 3 presets, you can adjust some things but not others. It gives you more flexibility than the other game modes. For example, I can change the brightness manually, which is nice. Low input lag mode, I'll come on to that in a little bit, but that's forced on with these gamer profiles. I mean, I'm happy to just have game mode disabled myself. Another thing is if you've got the even Gamer 1, Gamer 2 or Gamer 3, which is on the more flexible presets, if you've got them active, you'll see the colour setup menu is actually greyed out, so you can't adjust the white point, the colour balance, anything like that on the monitor. Shadow control, which I've gone through. Low input lag, the reason that's greyed out isn't because I had one of the game modes active, it's actually because I've got FreeSync active on the monitor at the moment. If you don't have that active, then FreeSync on the graphics card, if that isn't active, then you can turn the low input lag on or off. I tested this on an NVIDIA system. I don't notice any difference in the image quality, so I'd just leave that on, which I believe is the default, and with FreeSync it's irrelevant, it does its own thing with that anyway, but just leave that switched on. Game color, which is another way that the monitor can oversaturate in a similar way I was talking about before with the dynamic color boost, except this affects all shades and has a potentially more extreme effect. It's a bit like the digital vibrance control in NVIDIA GPUs. So shades are pulled towards the edge of the gamut. You reduce the shade variety, but you can make some shades appear a bit more saturated, or if you do it the other way, a bit less saturated, or entirely monochrome if you want to do that. There's low blue light control. There are various different settings here, weak, medium and strong. These are explored in the written review. The overdrive control, also explored in the review. You can set that to off, weak, medium or strong. Finally, there's extra. This allows you to select the input automatically or have it manually selected. If you've got multiple things connected to the monitor, that can be useful. Auto config, which like image setup, applies only to analog connections. Everything in that respect is automatically configured for digital connections. There's an off timer, which you can set between 1 and 24 hours, and after that period of time has elapsed, it will automatically put the screen on standby for you. It'll give you a little reminder on the screen that it's about to go on to standby, or turn itself off, and then if you twiddle the joystick or press one of the buttons on the controller, it'll cancel that. Image ratio, you can select auto or wide, which means if you're running a non-native resolution of a different aspect ratio to 16:9, you can have it so that the screen either displays black borders around the content, or it just stretches it to fit the 16:9 aspect of the screen. There's DDC/CI, which is part of the plug-and-play functionality of the monitor, and this allows you to use software to control the OSD, for example. AOC has its own software to do that. There's reset, which will reset everything to the factory defaults. Finally, there's a little information section, which includes the current resolution that's the monitor's running at, horizontal frequency, don't worry about that, and the vertical frequency. And as I mentioned before, I've got FreeSync active at the moment, so it just says FreeSync for the vertical frequency. If you are not connected to a GPU which is FreeSync compatible, for example, you've got an NVIDIA system, you'll just see the refresh rate that you've got selected, the static refresh rate displayed there. As I mentioned in the review, although it says FreeSync is active, it doesn't distinguish between it actually being, actively in use or not. It just means that you're connected to a FreeSync compatible GPU. It also doesn't display the current refresh rate if you've got FreeSync active. It simply says FreeSync. So there you have it. That was the OSD on-screen display menu system of the AOC AG322QCX. Be sure to check out the full review on pcmonitors.info. If you look at the description of the YouTube video, there's a link to that review. There's also a link to information about how you can help support the work that I do.